All right, so where did we leave off? So France is being attacked by all sides. The government is having problems. They're killing everyone left and right. And now there's this young, brilliant general. He used to be like this commoner guy. He rose up in the ranks because he's so smart. And he comes and he says, I can protect France. And he basically, through his military, contacts and stuff, rises to become the French emperor. And he, says, look, the revolution was great, but now it's time to make it better. And he's going to spread all those wonderful revolutionary ideas around Europe, whether or not the other people want it. So even though he loves the revolution, he is an absolute ruler. He's the emperor of France. And again, he gains his power because he's a military genius and he defeats all of France's enemies. And the people love him for that. Remember, they all, hyped up on nationalism. And he says, look, we can't have this republic. We can't have these, separation of powers and checks and balances. We need a strong leader and a strong centralized government with one ruler, one guy in charge. And that's going to be me, right? And he's going to protect the revolution and spread the revolution. So Napoleon Bonaparte becomes the French emperor, right? He declares himself emperor. And he tells the Pope, hey, you're going to crown me. And the Pope says, sure thing, boss. Because, that's how powerful Napoleon was. And here we see some of his awesomeness, right? He's being crowned there. That's his awesome throne. So what are some of the good things about Napoleon? Well, number one, wherever he goes, he creates these laws and he implements these laws that become known as the Napoleonic Code. And kind of like the Code of Hammurabi, the Byzantine and Justinian's code, now we have the Napoleonic Code. And these laws become kind of like the standard legal system in Europe in the 1800s and well into the 1900s. And, these laws say, okay, people have rights and, you have freedoms and there's freedom of religion and everyone gets education, right? Universal public education. The tax system isn't going to be as, harsh on the poorest of the poor. So he is an enlightened despot, right? He loves the Enlightenment ideas that give people rights and freedoms. But he's a despot because he's an absolute ruler. He doesn't want to give up anything. He's still an emperor. He's still a tyrant. And one of the things he also does is that he promotes people in the military, not because of their family or their ancestry or their heritage, but because of merit. Kind of like what Genghis Khan used to do with the Mongols way back when. So the French people absolutely love this guy. And he says, I'm going to expand the revolution. Right, and you see all these paintings. He was really, full of himself. He was really arrogant, and he's always, has that little pose with his hand stuck in his, shirt. And just to clarify, Napoleon, he wasn't short. He wasn't, like a midget, like some people would make fun of him. He was of average height, but the British hated him, and the British would always draw him as this really short guy. And that propaganda, that false advertising, that false lies, became so common that 100 something years later, 200 something years later, we still believe that Napoleon was short when he was more or less average height. So Napoleon says, I'm going to spread the revolution, and all those people that attacked us, now we're going to go teach them a lesson, and we're going to spread the revolution to them whether they want it or not. And he goes to war. Right, these are called the Napoleonic Wars. And he wins over and over and over again. He defeats Spain and Portugal. He defeats Italy, or the Italian city-states. He defeats the Holy Roman Empire. Right, it's still up and running, actually. Even though it barely isn't. So places like Austria, Prussia, aka Germany, that's the Holy Roman Empire still. He defeats the Netherlands. He defeats Belgium. He defeats Poland, etc., etc. He defeats all these people. He always wins. And he conquers them and he tells them, right, you're going to pay taxes, you're going to pay us. France is the best. You guys suck. And the two people he can defeat, one is the British, because the British are on an island and you can't really, invade it without having an awesome navy. And the British have the best navy ever. And the other one's going to be Russia, which we'll get to in a second. Here's the problem, though. When you start conquering people and you force them to submit to your power and your awesomeness, they're going to start hating you. And that same kind of like motivation that rose up with, when France was under attack, that same process, that nationalism, that idea of nationalism is going to stir up in Italy and Spain and Germany and Russia and everywhere else. Right? Because they don't want to be ruled by these foreigners. Who are these French guys to come to our country and tell us how to live our lives? France has shouldn't be telling Germany what to do, or Italy what to do, or anywhere else what to do, or Poland or Prussia or whoever. So by conquering people, he actually increases the spread of nationalism. Because those people think that they're the best, and then no one should tell them what to do, just like how France used to think that they're the best, and no one should tell them what to do. Same process, different places. So Napoleon's going to make one huge, giant mistake. And that huge, giant mistake is actually, strangely enough, going to be repeated about 130 years later by Adolf Hitler. And that is, he tries to invade Russia. And invading Russia, you just can't do it, especially in the wintertime. You can't invade Russia in the wintertime because you're going to freeze to death. And the Russians, what they do is, as they're getting attacked and they're forced to retreat, they just start burning their fields and their crops. They just burn it all up. So that means when the French arrive, there's no food, there's no shelter, there's no house, there's no warmth, and you're dead. Right? No one can conquer Russia unless you are, of course, the Mongols. So Napoleon loses, and he's forced to live in exile. And here he is, retreating. Right, his soldiers are all dead and starving and frozen, and he's defeated, and then he eventually dies. And look how sad he is, pobrecito. So that's Napoleon. So what's going to happen after Napoleon? What's going to happen after the Napoleonic Wars? So all of Europe gets together and says, we can't have this happen again. The Napoleonic Wars were the most destructive wars, in the 1800s, even worse, or probably as bad, as the 30 Years' War had been in the 1600s, right? The religious Protestant versus Catholic wars. So they had this big meeting in Austria, in the capital, Vienna. And they basically say, okay, look, Napoleon conquered all these places. These places are not going to be independent. They're not going to be part of the French Empire. So they redraw the map of Europe, right? They divide all the places and say, okay, France is over here, Germany's over here, blah, blah, blah. And they say, okay, look, all those, crazy laws that Napoleon put, you could cancel them out, right? So what we see is this conservative movement in Europe, right? Against the revolution, against the changes that the French Revolution brought about. And what we see is that there's going to be a new agreement amongst the powers of Europe. And that becomes known as the balance of power. That means that if one country like France gets way too powerful, all the other countries need to agree to put an end to it, to unite, to become allies, and weaken this, growing power. So if France becomes too powerful, everyone goes against them. If Germany or Italy becomes too powerful, everyone goes against them. If it's Russia, everyone goes against them. So what basically this means is there's going to be a lot of fighting, right? Because every time you feel threatened by your neighbor, boom, you're going to go to war against them. And every time they feel threatened, they're going to go against war against you. So the balance of power is going to cause these constant conflicts building up throughout the 1800s. And eventually, what we're going to see when we finally get to Unit 6, to the 20th century, when we get to World War I, we're going to see all these conflicts blow up big time. But we'll get to World War I soon enough. So in the 1800s, after the French Revolution, which early 1800s, but throughout the rest of the 19th century, we see a whole bunch of revolutions break out left and right, all over Europe. And these are liberal revolutions because they want to change the government, right? They want to bring those Enlightenment ideas. And for the most part, they're going to be unsuccessful, right? The French Revolution was successful short term, right? It didn't last forever. Napoleon pretty much ended it. They went back to an absolute monarchy. And then they went back to a king. And then they went to a republic. And then they went back to a king. And then another republic. So a lot of instability in France. So the French Revolution didn't have a kind of like a long-lasting political change, at least when it comes to the government. But eventually, those ideas of equality and fraternity, brotherhood, liberty, voting rights, right? All of that eventually becomes accepted in Europe. And writing laws and protecting people and writing the list of people's rights and the powers of the government, eventually those become more commonly accepted throughout Europe. So the French Revolution didn't really immediately change much, right? And the immediate changes within France weren't long lasting, but slowly, long term, right? Those ideas become more accepted. And not only in Europe, but in the Americas. And we're going to go back to across the Atlantic to Haiti and to Latin America in a future video. So, again, French Revolution, to recap. Poor people are starving. They rise up. The rich people or rich commoners take control. They gain all the power. Poor people remain poor. Or they die, fighting wars. And what else? Women gain nothing. The governments change back and forth from republic to constitutional monarchy to centralized, absolute monarchy under Napoleon, and then back and forth. So a lot of changes back and forth, not a lot of continuity here. And again, the people who benefited the most were, wealthy white men. Nobility didn't, they lost their status. Clergy lost their status. Most people gained some rights, freedom of speech and religion and that sort of stuff. Universal education, that's a big one. But overall, nothing really changed. Not much, at least. Especially if you're women, especially if you're poor, especially if you're not white. All right, so that's it for the end of the French Revolution. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.